Congressman, 1st District, Virginia. And by the way, this is also, he also in the 1st District is Matthews County. I just figured that out after 10 years or whatever, that Matthews County is in the 1st District. I finally figured that out, right?
Yes.
So I got to get my geography down. So Matthews County in the 1st, but we've got Dr. Wittmann with us. He's also the chairman on the subcommittee of the House Military Readiness Subcommittee. Dr. Wittmann, I want to go right to ISIS war or something going on. The president committing another 200 special forces to Iraq. This sounds like a slow drip. I want to get your comment on two things. One, the report yesterday that came out says that the president was giving this 200 men and women who's putting their lives at risk the authorization to kill the enemy. Okay, well, you go to war. That's kind of what the deal is. Mm-hmm. Here's my question. The other 50 he sent, what was there? They didn't have authorization to shoot the enemy? What the hell is going on here?
I know. Well, John, I tell you, there are a number of different layers of this, and let me kind of try to peel back those layers. First of all is we've been asking for a long time about what is the strategy, because there really hasn't been a comprehensive strategy. It's been piecemeal. It's been a little bit here, as you said, 50 special operators here, now an additional 200, some airstrikes. He talks all the time about these 65 coalition partners. Really only 9 of those partners are operating there actively as part of these combat operations. I just got back from visiting countries in the Middle East. We visited with President al-Sisi in Egypt. I visited with the Deputy Crown Prince in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is no longer flying missions into Iraq or Syria. They are now at war with the Houthi rebels in Yemen. Egypt also no longer is flying missions. They are trying to keep tabs on their border to the west in Libya, which is ungoverned, where ISIS is establishing a stronghold with al-Qaeda in the Sinai Peninsula. So the partners there, countries like the United Arab Emirates, Jordan, no longer flying air missions there. So this whole idea of this coalition, there are really only 9 partners in the coalition that are doing anything. So there's not a comprehensive strategy. It's piecemeal. It's kind of let's do it as we go. When we ask for a strategy, we can't get it. Now, yesterday, General Joe Dunford, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said, oh, yes, we do have a policy, but it hasn't been properly resourced. Now, we have, as members of Congress, properly resource that strategy. I believe it's a matter of did the Pentagon put the resources in the right place. So now you have this divergence. You have piecemeal strategy being put together on the run. We're being told that it's not properly resourced. When we asked General Dunford yesterday, is ISIS contained? He said no. The president said ISIS is contained. Yesterday, Secretary Carter said that we were at war. When we asked General Dunford said, no, we're not at war. As you know, John, as you point out, Congress has to declare that. Congress must, I believe, take up an authorization of the use of military force. And you know I've been saying that all along, that that's Congress's responsibility. So let's go through this. No strategy. Partners in this 65 nation coalition, only a small number of them are doing anything, and Arab partners aren't doing much of anything, if anything at all. Only Bahrain is doing any type of mission sets in that area, and we are not containing ISIS. One person says we're at war, one person says we're not. Congress hasn't taken action to authorize war. It is absolutely a fragmented mess. It's something that we must get our arms around if we are truly going to defeat ISIS. You are not going to defeat ISIS under the current strategy or the current direction of this administration.
Dr. Wittmann, you went to the Middle East. You visited Egypt. That's number one. I want to talk about that in a second. I get a lot of people on, and on both sides of the aisle, sir, and they keep telling me that this phantom Arab army is just going to pop up one day out of the ground, and the U.S. is going to be behind the scenes backing them somehow, and there's going to be, 500,000 Arab troops on the ground supplied by the Saudis, Kuwait, I suppose, the Arab Emirates, right? These are countries that won't even take the Syrian refugees in, right? But now they're going to supply troops. I mean, this is just a phantom mission, right? I mean,
well,
you were out there.
It is, John, in that sense, to look historically at what's happened when anybody has asked the Arab nations to come together to provide troops on the ground, it just hasn't come together. And it's not because I don't believe those countries don't want to do that. It's a number of things. All those militaries operate differently. They've never trained jointly, so if you put a bunch of disparate forces together, who's going to do command and control? It would have to be the United States. How do you make sure then, too, that those nations can actually work together to be effective? How do you know, too, that they have the different capabilities necessary on the ground? They have not historically worked together because of a variety of different problems. So the reality, you may get someone that says, yes, we'll provide some ground troops, but the thing is it a significant number of ground troops? Can they operate in concert to have a meaningful effect on the ground? And, John, if you look at it historically, the answer to that question is no. And without U.S. leadership, nothing's going to happen there because the coalition partners, countries like Turkey that should be part of this, countries like Germany, Great Britain, France, and others, are kind of standing on the sidelines saying, hey, we're waiting for the U.S. to do something. And when the U.S. does nothing, you're not going to see the rest of the world jump in and do things. And especially if you don't have a plan where you can go to the Arab nations, go to any of these coalition partners and say, Egypt, I need for you to do this. Will you commit to do this? Will you commit to bringing these troops, to providing these aircraft? This is what you need to do, and this is how we want you to do it. Short of that, these nations, John, are not going to pop up on their own and say, hey, this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to provide, and this is how we're going to do it. That's why U.S. leadership here is lacking. U.S. leadership is critical if ISIS is going to be defeated. In the absence of U.S. leadership, we see this vacuum, and in that vacuum, guess what happens? We see Russia come in, now siding with the Shias in Iran and the Hezbollah and Syrian forces there friendly to Bashar Assad. And if we don't think that destabilizes the region, then we haven't learned the lessons of history. So all of those things, I think, put together the scenario we find ourselves today. As you know, the Parliament there in Great Britain is actually taking up an authorization of the use of military force. Steps ahead of the United States. At least somebody out there is leading. At least somebody is saying, hey, we've got to do something to defeat ISIS. France now is doing the same thing. The U.S. needs to lead. Leadership is not saying we're going to throw another 200 special operators in there. Now, our special operators are great, and they can do wonderful things. But 200 fighting alongside the Peshmerga and Iraqi forces, by the way of which President Abani yesterday said, whoa, wait a minute, we haven't committed to doing this. So my question is has the Pentagon or the administration even talked to the Iraqi government? Every day you look at this and you go, it's piecemeal, it's doing this on the run. It's just doing enough to look like you're doing something, but not enough to really be effective. So, John, if you look at it across the board, I think that there are multiple problems here.
Well, Congressman, it's political, not strategic, and I think anybody that's following this, special ops or not, my question goes back to why don't we get an authorization of war, military force, if you will, the acronym AUMF. What is holding that up? Why doesn't Obama come to Congress like he should, like the Constitution states, and lay out his plan, and then you guys are either going to go with it or not? I mean, why are we sending in our men and women in harm's way with no authorization from Congress?
Well, John, Congress has an obligation to do that, and as you know, the administration prior to that hasn't pushed it because I don't believe that they really had a deep desire to do much there in the Middle East. They have just yesterday said, yes, Congress needs to pass an authorization to use military force. I've been one, as well as many others there, to advocate that Congress must take up an authorization of the use of military force. But, John, if we're going to do that, we also must have a comprehensive strategy from the administration to say, okay, we want an authorization to use military force, and this is how we are going to use it, and this is what we are going to do to defeat ISIS. And we can have the debate, but I can tell you an authorization of the use of military force without a clear strategy, without an understanding about what we are going to do ourselves and with others to defeat ISIS, I don't believe we'll be successful in Congress. I want us to be successful. I want us to defeat ISIS. But it's got to be under a complete, comprehensive strategy that we know will work, or at least has a high assurance of working. Nothing is ever 100% guaranteed, but you can guarantee that if we put together the right plan, I'm confident that we can defeat ISIS. But short of that, I think it becomes just as you said, a political exercise. Mm-hmm. It's showing that you're doing just enough to say that you're doing something, but not enough to truly be effective. So the administration has to come to Congress with a comprehensive plan, has to say this is what we need the authorization of use of military force for, and Congress must act. And if not, Congress ought to take it up and say, you know what, there isn't a plan here. And short of a plan, we're going to take this up and say under the current conditions, we are or are not going to authorize the use of military force. I think that's where we are right now. The administration has, I believe, an obligation to come to Congress with a comprehensive plan to defeat ISIS.
If we're going to defeat them, everybody knows we have to send in U.S. ground troops because you have to take their territory away, which means that basically we would be invading other countries. I don't see how we do that without an AUMF. I don't see how you can send anybody in to, I mean, right now, Syria is not at war with the United States. So we would have to send troops there without an authorization from Congress. That sounds inconceivable to me.
Well, it should not happen. As you know, sending special operators in to work jointly with forces on the ground in those countries is something that the president, you can stretch and say that he does have that authorization, but as you said, advancing a ground operation in Syria or even on a large scale in Iraq, and then yesterday with President Abadi saying, whoa, wait a minute, we haven't approved this, is not what we should be doing at this particular point. And it just astounds me that, you know, when you hear a comment like that from Iraq, the question comes up, has the United States even talked to them? Have we said this is what we are going to do? So I, John, believe that we are far short of where we need to be, and you're exactly right. Congress must act with an authorization use of military force for any scaled operation larger than what we're pursuing right now, which is just on the micro level. 50 special operators here, now proposed another 200, is not in any way, shape, or form going to defeat ISIS. You might push them out of a few areas, and I've been up and visited Kurdistan, have been there and visited with the Peshmerga, with Prime Minister Barzani, talked to them about issues there with the Kurds. And let me tell you, the Peshmerga are fierce fighters. They will defeat ISIS. The thing is they can only do it within that particular region. They can't spread across Iraq and Syria and do the job that is necessary to be done by a larger coalition of forces. So, we see pieces of this, and our special operators with Peshmerga and Iraqi forces can probably do some good in the northern part of Iraq, but that's not going to defeat ISIS across the whole area that they occupy in Iraq and Syria.
I mean, Dr. Wittmann, this thing is a complete disaster. Now, the other day we find out that whistleblowers at CENTCOM are saying that we gave out misleading intelligence narrative. I mean, what is going on here?
Well, that's very, very disturbing, and I know that Chairman Devin Nunes, who's chairman of the Intelligence Committee, has been looking into this, but it's very disturbing to have our intelligence analysts, the individuals that get this information, that look at it, that interpret it and say, this is what's going on, setting that up the chain, and either being asked to change what their findings are or their findings being changed somewhere up the chain is very, very disturbing. And we see that when that happens, many times it's politics that are being played with that. It's not wanting to reflect the true reality, but wanting to reflect the reality that suits a political agenda. That's very disturbing to me, because when you hear the president say, oh, ISIS is the JV, or we have ISIS contained, and you see intelligence reports or hear from these intelligence analysts that that's not the information that came from them, it's very, very disturbing. And you speak about President Erdogan there yesterday saying that he would resign if there was any association with the illegal oil trade from ISIS into Turkey. And then we hear today this association. It makes us all wonder what in the world is going on. And as you said, when I went there and visited with President Abani in Iraq, there is concern with the government in Baghdad with what's happening with the United States. There's also tension between the government in Baghdad and the Kurdish government there. So there are all kinds of regional issues there that make this even more difficult for coalition forces in the United States to come in there and to defeat ISIS because of this churn that's happening there and this destabilizing effort that happens, whether it's in Turkey, who now we see maybe a little more clearly why they've been reticent to really get deeply involved in this conflict, because they've been benefiting from what ISIS is doing in the area. So, John, all these things are deeply concerning, and it takes away from our ability to really address the true nature of this threat and to really lay down what needs to be done to defeat ISIS. And you hit the nail on the head. If you're going to defeat ISIS, this is not a counterinsurgency. This is a conventional force where they want to occupy land and hold land. They want to establish this caliphate. And in doing that, they're taking land and holding land. The only way that we defeat them is to take that land back. The only way you do that, you can't do that through airstrikes. You have to do that with ground forces.
All right, that's going to be it. We want to thank Congressman Rob Wittmann for being with us, chairman of the Subcommittee on Military Readiness, Virginia, Republican, District 1. More info, wittman.house.gov. I'll see you in a couple weeks, Dr. Wittmann. Thanks for being with us.